Okay, so I'm going to work with my lined pocket first, because the first thing we're going to be doing is putting the pockets onto the front of the jacket before we sew the shoulder seams. So the first thing I'm going to do is put my pocket together with my lining, and I can only go one way with this, that's fine. And then we're going to put some pins in. We're leaving this slanted edge open, but we're doing all the way round the other edges. So let's just put some pins in just to hold this in place for us. And I'm putting my pin heads in the middle, and then the points pointing out towards the edge so that the fabric is laid flat. Luckily with cotton and with wool, they tend to stick onto each other quite nicely just through the fibres. So it doesn't tend to do a lot of shifting, but that's usually quite a good way of just pinning it, just so that your heads are out the way for when you're sewing. So we're going to start here. There's the slanted edge that we're going to leave open. We're going to start here, so across here, all the way down there, to the back there, pivot, and then come back up here again. So 1/4 inch seam allowance again, so let's start at the edge there, and I've got coordinating thread in my machine. Just reverse stitch there, and then let's put the needle in the work. I'm going to take the pin out for the first one because we're going to work up to this corner just here. So we're going to stitch along here. So we're about 1/4 inch away from the edge, and the way that we check is we leave our needle in the work. So you can either hand crank it on the side of your machine, or I've got a button on mine so that it always stays down. And I can see by moving the fabric around that I'm extending past the edge of my presser foot. So I know I need to do 1, maybe 2 stitches more. And then I can see now that I'm straight onto the line I was following for my 1/4 inch seam allowance. So that works quite nicely. And with this curve, we might be able to sew around some of it without pivoting, but I'll show you what we do. So we sew until we can see that level with the edge of the fabric, it's going to start and bunch up if we try and pull it too much. In that case, leave your needle in the work, lift up the presser foot, and then just start to change the angle on your stitching on your fabric, just a little bit at a time, just as you just work your way around that curve. And I'm just lifting up my presser foot with my finger here, just very slightly, just taking the pressure off the fabric. I don't need to do it all the way up to the top all the time, just enough just to be able to move that fabric round. And then we can then start and take it off the end. Just move that pin because that's out in the way. And now we're going to curve back up on ourselves as well. So some of it it'll work, but if your fabric starts to bunch up at all, that's a sign that you need to lift your presser foot. Let's do the same over to this side here, so we get quite close to the edge. Lift our presser foot up and measure up the side there, and that's just about right, which is good. And if not, I'd have adjusted it. And then we're going to sew right up to the top and reverse on the edge just here. And let's take our starting and stopping threads off, and I'll show you on here. So this is how it looks. So look how nice that curved edge looks when you do that pivoting, and just take a few stitches at a time. And then we've got a sharp pivot just here where we've got a right angle, and another sharp pivot here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to just trim off our corners, and I go just slightly wider than 45 degrees on those, just because that's going to take out that bulk from in that corner. I go up to, but not through the stitches, or just a few fibres away, because we don't want it to fray. I'm then going to do the same on this corner just here. Let's take some of this away as well. So that's like that on there, so that's those 2 corners done. And then here we're going to be going from a longer line into a shorter line. So what we need to do here is we need to take out some triangles, and you can either do it with your snips like this. Again, don't go through your stitched line. If you do, then just go back and reinforce it with a few more stitches on your machine. But we're just taking out that bulk from this edge here. We can't just put snips in it because this line is going to be longer, and that's still going to bunch up in there. So you take out these little triangles, because then that will make this all sit nice and flat as we go round. The other thing that you can use, if you have them, is pinking shears, which are the ones with the triangular blades. And if you've got those, it'll do exactly the same effect. It'll take out the bulk of that edge for you, but just don't go too close because you're going to spoil your stitches. So either way it works fine. So let's just get rid of those bits, because then the next thing that we're going to do now is we're going to turn this round. So just put your finger inside, because you've got to be careful here, because you're on a bias edge here for your lining and for your top fabric. So you've got to be careful. So let's just take a finger in there and very carefully. I find that pushing works better than pulling generally when we're trying to work with these very small things. So just fold that back so that that can just all start to poke through. And then use your finger just to start and coax that shape to come out from the inside. And I'm not saying that a lined pocket doesn't look nice and give a nice effect, but I just think it's just going to make it bulky for stitching it on. Right, so now I'm just using the edge of my seam gauge here to poke out this corner, because that's a nice right angle corner just in there. Just get that nice and straight as much as we can do. And then we've got another one just here, at the bottom just here, haven't we? Another. Just be careful, don't put too much pressure on your fabric, because you will go through it. And then if we just put our fingers on there, I can feel that there's very little bulk on that corner, but we've got that lovely curved edge. So now we're just sort of rolling the fabric between our finger and thumb, and we're just trying to get it so that we don't get any of the lining coming through to the other side. I'm just going to use a pin and just help this corner out, because that needs to be nice and flat. Just make sure this one's nice and flat too. Now's the time just to spend the time just doing that. And then we're going to take this to the ironing board and we're going to press this, but just try and make sure that as much as possible that lining fabric is pushed through to the inside. Okay. I haven't closed at this top edge yet, but we're going to do that. Well, should we do that? We'll do that now, and then we'll press it. Okay. So what it says in the instructions is just to do a zigzag stitch across the edge here, just to neaten that off. So I'm going to put that onto my zigzag, and I've got a 5 depth, which is fine, and a 2 stitch width, so that'll be fine too. So let me just line this up on our machine. And you just want to just go over the edge of that pressed edge with your stitch. And that will just trim those edges off. And there we go, that's what it looks like. You see how it just stretches out slightly? And there it is from the inside with that zigzag stitch on there, look. Okay, that's my ironing board and my press mat, and we'll just press this. Okay, so we've got our fabric here. The other thing that I would recommend as well is that because this is a wool fabric and we don't want it to go shiny, I would recommend you use a press cloth. So you can either use a fabric handkerchief, very good, you know, the old-fashioned kinds that you used to have, they're very good, or you can use a piece of cotton lawn or a piece of sheeting or a pillowcase, something like that that you've got available to you, just anything, or a piece of scrap fabric. So we've got our lovely curve along the edge there, so let's just pop this on top here. And then let's just press this now so that this is going to lay nice and flat for us. And I'm going to put a little bit of water in my iron because I haven't got any iron in there, and I think we could benefit from a little bit of steam. Okay, that's better. I can hear the steam coming out. That'll just help that edge just lie nice and flat. And again this side, plenty of steam. Trying to make this go as flat as we can so that it'll be easier to apply. And with taking the bulk out of that edge there, we've got a nice curve. Just try and make sure that your lining is just to the inside of your fabric on that edge, because that's going to be really important when you come to sew this on, because that's my main concern, is that you're going to be able to see the edge of the lining fabric when we attach this pocket. Okay, so there we've got a lovely nice crisp pocket, and you'll have 2 of these because you'll do the same with both of these. Next thing that we're going to do is just turn over this edge here by 1 centimetre towards the back. So I'm going to use my press mat again, and I like pinning into my press mat to give me that extra stability. So let's just pop that pin in there to hold that in place, and then we can go to this edge, turn over 1 centimetre, which we've got there. And we're turning it over to the inside. It's not turned over to the outside. It's turned over to the inside. That's all there. So then using our press cloth again and the iron again, we can just press that seam there just to hold that nice and flat for us. Okay. Give it a blow, let it just dry so that it holds that nicely down for us. And now what we're going to be doing is, move that out of the way, we're just going to do a little hand stitch on here to hold this down as per the instructions. Let's get a little bit of our bobbin thread so that we can just do that. You could top stitch it down, but you're going to end up with top stitching on your pocket, and that's obviously not the look that Sarah Peel, the designer, was going for. So let's just do this. And I suppose this is why I'm saying you go to all the trouble of lining the pocket, but then you've just got a raw edge here that you just then stitching down. It's just not making sense to me. But anyway, so this is what you would do if you were following the instructions to the letter. So I'm just making sure to catch the lining only. My stitches are not going all the way through. I'm just catching that down just onto that lining edge. Or catching the edge down onto the lining, should I say. All the way along. Okay, so that's got that caught down, just a few little stitches, just cast our thread off. So this is what you end up with when your pocket's finished. So you've got your curved edge there, looking all lovely and neat. None of those stitches are showing through onto the other side. And then we've got then our edge there where we transition from our fabric to our lining, which is what I have the issue with, I think, but anyway, we'll go on to that. So let's take our pocket that it's going to go on to. We've got our pin on here so that we know that which is the right edge. Just put the tufts of the thread up so we can see properly where we're working towards. And then if I put the pocket on, we know that that was lining up to there and that was lining down. And then that bottom pocket there was going towards that extra section there. So, yeah, that's right. So we are right on our top edge, and then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to pin the pocket in place with the heads of the pins in towards the middle, and I'm following those lines all the way down. Oh, don't say our lines aren't even. Oh, that's interesting, the lines aren't totally even on here, on our fabric. Let's get it straight on the diagonal edge instead. We've got a little bit of leeway with the lines going backwards and forwards. Let's just get that right first, because that's going to hold it there. That's better. That's better. I'm happier. Right, I was starting to worry then. But it's interesting because down the bottom here, these lines seem to go off a little bit. Okay, so this fabric isn't lining up quite as evenly as I thought it would do. Not quite sure why. Because it should have done the top one going down does. That one does just there. Line it up as best as you can. We did our best to try and match it up. So then I've got the pocket pinned on with it corresponding with the marks that we've got, and going through the diagonal edge here as being straight. My issue is that when you look at this pocket, if I just turn that fabric to the side, can you see the lining edge that's poking out all the way along here? It doesn't matter how you try and sew that, because that line's been butted up, you're always going to get that line. And what we would do if we were stitching this down now is we would start here, we would reverse stitch just here, just gently, or just take your threads through to the inside and knot them off, and then we'd then sew across and would sew all the way down here, doing that pivoting again that we've done before, where we'd go around the curve, and you're going to be sewing just like 1 or 2 millimeters in from the edge, all the way down and around. And if I just put a few stitches down this side here, just to show you that I'm not making it up about this lining, and the more of a contrast lining you have, the more this is going to be showing. So let's put fabric just there. Let's move my needle across so that I'm happy with where it's stitching. Yeah, okay, just there. And then if I now just stitch down here for a few stitches, which I'll take out later, then you should be able to see that that pocket will stitch down. So there's our stitches there. The pocket stitches down very nicely, but can you see that edge there of the lining? Oops, that's just showing all the time, and that's going to show all the way around that pocket. It's not enough to make it look like piping, and it's going to vary in places as you go round, and so I'm going to suggest a different way for doing your pocket than the way is suggested in the instructions. So if you want to go ahead and do your pockets with the lining, then just follow exactly what I've done there, but just start at the top here, across there, pivot, turn round, and then just go down, and then come back up here again and reverse stitch there. Don't stitch down this diagonal side, because that's where you'll have your your gap for your pocket just there, so that Bramble could put his hand in if he wanted to. Okay, let's go on to pocket mark 2. Okay, so on to pocket mark 2. So we've got our 2 pockets just here, and what I want you to do now is to start here and just go through 1 layer with the top side up, and we're just going to run a row of tacking stitches. It's going to give us an edge to work to, and that's at 1/2 centimetre. So let's just take one at a time. Let me move my needle position back into the middle, and I'm going to take my stitch length up to a 4, because that will give us enough of a line to follow, but we'll be able to take them out much easier when we come to finishing. So I'm not going to reverse stitch either. This is what we're doing, something called stay stitching. I know with stay stitching you usually use a shorter stitch length, but because I know that we might want to take this out, we're almost sort of putting in a guideline really for the stitching. So let's just, well, let me move that pin out into the middle more, because that's going to be in the way, isn't it, for our stitching round. And I'm just going to just start going and just use that along, and then needle in the work, and then pivot as you would do normally, just to make sure you're at the right point. 1 more stitch, that's better. Okay, and then follow that down, and then we're going to do that pivoting again, needles in the work. So as soon as you can't kind of move your fabric because it's bunching up under the presser foot, just lift your presser foot slightly, twist it slightly, and just do 1 or 2 stitches. You'll do fewer stitches because it's a bigger stitch. So try not to go too fast with this, just take your time. Oops, just says she. Just make sure you're going into that corner, and then up the side here. And when you get to this side here, I want you to then increase it, so you're doing a 1 centimetre line across here. Okay, take that out. And so I don't know if you'll be able to see that line of stitches or not, but I've got 1 centimetre across here going across the top, and then 1/4 all the way going down here. Let's do exactly the same again. We can take these long threads off. Not on any of those, but it's just given us a line now, so we know where we would have turned it if we had sewn it in, with the lining and then turned it round. So that's the right side up. So I'm going to work. So let me do my 1 centimetre seam first on this one. So just turning that, leaving that pin in, so we know which is the right way up. So let's go across this side here, just nice and carefully. Don't pull on your fabric, because that's the bias edge. Let's go down here at 1/4 inch or 1/2 centimetre down to the bottom. And now we're going to go around the edge, just round here. So needle in the work, and we can start and pivot. That pin there is just distorting that fabric. If you're using the edge of the curve, then it should help you keep that curve true to how it was drafted, and then make them both identical, because you're wanting, your seam allowance needs to be the same because you don't want them to be one slightly bigger than the other. You want them both to be the same size. Let me just go back a stitch on that one. That's better. Okay. Edge. Okay. Let's take our threads off. So we've got both of our pockets here, both with the top edge on, and we can see where our lines have gone there for taking our stitches round. The next thing that we're going to do now, let's do that bit first, is while we've still got the machine out, let's just zigzag now along this raw edge here. So the same as we would have been doing before, let's put it back onto the zigzag stitch, and we're just going to zigzag this raw edge. Make sure you just don't pull it, just help it through the machine. Just be careful when you're pulling your threads out. Just distort it slightly, so just take it steady, but we should be able to steam that back into shape. Let's just do the other one. So that's just going to take care of that raw edge for us. Okay, we've finished with the sewing machine just for a moment. So let me get my press mat out, because it'll be easier to see with that. So now what we need to do here is we still need to take out some of this bulk along the edge here and just trim our corners. We're going to just mitre these corners, and you'll have seen me doing mitering the corners before now in order to get a nice neat finish and a nice turn without any raw edges, because generally speaking the pocket lining has been put on, so you don't get a raw edge at this point here and here. But we're going to do it a different way, so we're going to pay attention. I'll tell you what I'll do, if I can, and I can, I'm just going to draw just tack a line in for you so you can see where my raw edge was. My corners are, because with the dark thread on the dark fabric you can't actually see. Let me just put these tacking stitches in. Okay, so I've just put some little yellow tacking stitches in there, so hopefully you can see there and down at the bottom. So working with, have our press cloth ready, working with this corner first here, I'm going to fold that little corner there up so that it hits that point there where we've got the turn on our pressing. So as if we were going to snip it off, but we haven't, we're going to just press it up. Just watch your fingers. Put a pin in it if you need to hold it in place. So that's then holded that up there on that corner. Then what we're going to do is we're going to fold in first one side and then the other side so that it meets that corner on that edge, and that will give us, if I can hold it like that, it will give us this mitered corner from the inside. Oops, let me press it. And that will help. So just working one side at a time. Just fold over your fabric so that that stitch line that we've just made is just on the edge. Don't do the curve yet, you're just doing this pointed corner. Just do one side, and if you want to, you can just put a pin in just to hold it in place for you as well, because it does have this wool does have a tendency to want to flick out on you. So just pinning into your press mat is a good idea. So just put a bit of steam on there. Hold that down. And then we're going to go on to the other one. Make sure that little corner that we first folded in stays in, because that's got to stay folded in place in order to make this work properly. And then we just do a little press there as well. And what we get, if I blow that off, is you get a really neat corner where you've got no raw edge. Can you see on the back there how that's all folded in? You don't get a raw edge poking out, because the traditional way to do it would be to fold over one side and then fold over the other side, but you always get this little bit of raw edge. It doesn't matter which way round you do it first, you always get the chance for this little dog ear of raw edge to poke out on you when you're stitching it, and just add that bulk. By doing it this way with the mitered corner, it's much smoother to go round when you're sewing, and you haven't got any of the raw edges in order to poke out. and that's what I use this quite a lot on all of mine. And there's a red dress in the background there, and I've used that on the patch pockets for that one. So what we're going to do then, so that's one edge, and we're going to do the same on this one down here. So let's fold that corner in first to the edge of the pocket, and it's on these small garments, it's a minuscule amount, it really is. Press cloth. And yeah, you can do it the other way, but I'm all about trying to get it to the best quality that you can, because that's what's going to elevate your stitching against somebody else's. Okay, and then press that. So I fold in the side seam now and press that down, and now I'm going to fold in the top one. The fabric won't meet quite the same way because it's a slightly wider angle on this bottom one, but it will still give you the same neat effect on the edge of that pocket. Don't fold it in too much, just go to your tacked line. Okay, this top line here, don't worry about that because we are going to be folding that down, and because the way that's going to fold, your raw edge will be out of the way. But what I do want you to do now is to get either your pinking shears or do those little diagonals and just trim off some of the seam allowance that is around this curved edge, just like that. I'm literally just taking off a really small amount, but it'll just take the bulk out of that corner for when it folds over. And if you wanted to press it first, maybe that might have been a good idea before we snip it off, but it's up to you. But you can now follow that edge. You won't be able to see it here because it's so dark for you, but you can now fold that edge to that stitch line that we did before, that we've just done, and that will fold all these edges in. Don't go too close to your edge when you're snipping. We're just going to be folding in that edge, and it just gives us an edge to work to so that we can see where we are. Just pin it into this, pin it into your ironing board. So I can see why Sarah has said to do the lining, but I'm hoping I'm going to be able to show you that it sometimes gives you that look that you might not appreciate. And if you don't know that there's a different way of doing things, then you know, you don't know how to change things to the way that you do want them, but that's what hopefully I can show you. So now I've got this all pinned onto my board in the curve, and now I can go over my pins, and these are glass headed pins so they won't melt on me, and I can press that in place. And down this edge here as well, up to that edge there. So that's all nice and neatly pinned. Folded down. Top edge is folded down, so the only thing then that I need to do is go to the top edge just here, and then I'm keeping my corners folded in first. Well, I haven't done that top one, let me just do that top one first. We're then going to fold that over to the stitch line on the top just there as well, and put our pins in. And that's going to hold that down in place for us whilst we use the press cloth and press that. So we've lost a layer of bulk of the lining fabric on our pocket. So if I just take those pins out now, but from the front you'll see that that looks just the same as it did, and we'll just tuck these under when we just start to sew them. I'll show you how to tuck under these edges. So I think I would, on the second one, I would turn under the edge while I've got my full seam allowance in place, and then once I've got that off, I'll take a little trim, and that will then just help that just sit in place just nicely on the back there. So let me just get my other one prepped, and then I'll come back to you, and then we'll be able to work with these to stitch these onto the jacket. So I've just finished pressing this one with the extra fabric. Can you see all those little folds in the fabric just on that curve just there? That's what we take off when we're stitching, when we go round it with our pinking shears. So we've got a nice curved edge from the front there, but now what I'm going to do is just open that out because it'll keep the memory of the fold, and then just snip off a small amount just on that edge I do go quiet when I concentrate, don't I? And then you can see that that folds in much nicer now without all of that bulk. And you've literally taken off such a small amount on that curve, but it just makes all the difference with those folds of fabric. Okay, so we've now, oh, I need to fold over this edge as well, don't I? So let me just fold over this edge now the same way and press this, and then we'll be ready for attaching this. Oh, the first thing we do need to do is I will still go down here and just slip stitch this folded edge here on the diagonal point. So it's that diagonal there. On the inside, I'll just slip stitch it to the inside of the fabric, and with wool it's really easy. Just pick up a fibre as you're going along, and then you'll be able to stitch that, and it should be invisible. So you don't want to see your stitches from the front here, but you just want to catch that edge down that you've zigzagged. So the next thing we need to do is take the two right sides of our jacket, our waistcoat, marked upwards, and now we're going to use our tailor's tacks and our stripes to match our pockets onto them. So let's take this first one here. We're matching up those pink marks through the side there. That'll help us get it marked up. And I do put a pin across this diagonal edge to hold it in place, but we won't be stitching across there. And then we're lining up as best as we can the rest of the lines to give us that pattern matched jacket that we'd expect on a tailored jacket. And I'm going to put my pin marks in, take my pin out mark in the front, and I'm going to put them into so I put my pins with the heads into the middle, but then the edges, the points of the pins go out towards those edges, and you're just trying to catch that down as neatly as possible. And again on the corner here. We're going to use our awl just to help us work with that very small seam allowance that we've got under there. Quite a lot of pins, but we'll move them as we start to stitch, but it's just got to hold those corners in place. And the other thing I'm going to do is just swoosh out these tailor's tacks so that we're not going to be catching those threads into any of the seams. Well, two have just come out, but we've kind of placed it now anyway. And I've gone with the diagonal match on the side there, and then the centre front edge is matched nicely, but across this bottom edge for some reason the stripes aren't quite matching up, but that one matches up down the front and these match here along the side just there. So I don't quite know why that hasn't gone right on there at this moment in time, if I'm brutally honest with you all. We did our best. So again, let's just match this one up as best as we can do, and the points are matching with everything. And I'm just going to pin this one down as well. So one goes across the diagonal, I get my lines marked up on my diagonal, and then just pop that seam allowance under. At this stage I don't worry too much if I can see the odd one of our tacking stitches marking the edge of our pocket, because we can take those out with our quick unpick once we've actually got this sewn down. And that's why we used a large stitch, so that we could actually keep an eye on that, and we got that marked down into place. So we've got it marked. We used it for ironing that edge up, didn't we? So just tuck your edges in, and then pins out those corners and that curve. Make sure your pocket's sitting nice and flat. And I know a lot of people will be saying I've made this a lot more complicated than it needed to be, but if we go into the trouble of making something nice, let's just make it as nice as we possibly can, shall we? And that's not to guilt shame anybody who chose to do it a different way. It's absolutely whatever you think your patience levels can manage. I totally get that, and it's different for all of us. Okay, so final adjustment there, and then what we're going to do is going to take this to the sewing machine, and we're going to start on this edge here. So we're going to sew from one edge of the slanted edge, and we're going to come out to this point and pivot all the way down here, around here to this edge here, and then come up to here and then reverse stitch there again. We're going to leave the slanted edge here open. I know it's pinned closed at the moment, but that's going to be open. And we're just going to take our time, and we're going to tuck under all of these edges as we come to them, and they'll get nicely tucked under there. But if you can see, whereas before we were seeing a part of the lining on the edge of the pocket, on here, because we have no lining, then that pocket there is just going to be straight onto the dark fabric without that edge that we were seeing before. And that's why we've gone to all of this trouble with what we've done. So yeah, Sarah's way was easier, but doesn't give that quite that same finish. But it's up to you, as I say, what you prefer to do. So let's work on one at a time. And this time I'm going to move my needle so it's, in fact I'll take out these tailor's tacks just here because we don't need those in now. We've positioned our pocket with our pins. Got that all out, okay. So I'm going to now position my needle across to the very left. Get my left and my right mixed up sometimes. Presser foot is just on the very edge of the transition between the pocket and the waistcoat, but just on the pocket side of it. And then I'm just looking ahead to the seam I'm going to sew, and I'm just making sure that all of those edges that I wanted to be tucked under, whoops, there's one there that was just poking out, are tucked under. So that when we're going to sew across this, it is going to be absolutely where we want it to be. Okay. Holding on to our threads, and I need the stitch length is at 2.2. I'm going to leave it at that because this thread is such a good match. So a couple of stitches forward. Let's take my pin out, put my needle in my work, and now a couple of stitches back, just holding that pocket on the edge there, and then we're just going to sew across this top edge to the corner. And then I've left my needle in the work, lift up the presser foot, and now I'm going to pivot. Just make sure again, because we've not got that lining holding those edges in, we need to be straight down here. So just use your awl, which is your pointed tool, to hold, or you can use the nose of the point of your quick unpick, but be really careful to keep your blade out of the way. And then we're just going to follow down this edge down here. And I can see I've got a little bit poking out just here, so let me just take that pin out just there. And I'm going to just then push under the edge of the pocket that's just poking out, so it's got a lovely smooth edge. And I've got my finger on it, and now I'm sewing along, and it's going to catch just that down right on the edge. And if we need to just pivot, just to take the pressure off that fabric, we will do, but you can use your point of your tool to hold everything down all nicely. Take that pin out. Just lift that presser foot up, just make sure everything's all sitting all nicely underneath there. Just a quick check every now and again, just to make sure everything's as right as you want it to be. And I think that Sarah actually sewed hers down with a zigzag, but I don't know, it's up to you. You can do if you want to, but I'm just using a straight stitch to sew mine down. Just lift up that presser foot. I forgot to take out these orange yellow bits of the tailor's tack. Let me just get those out, so don't need those. Okay. Going up to this corner here now, just make sure that's all lying all under nicely. A couple more stitches I think, then up this side here. The point's lying under nicely, so that's fine. And then I'm just going to reverse at the top here, just to give us a couple of threads just to anchor that down. Let's undo that, and let's cut off our threads. Let's leave a tail because we can poke those through. Right, so there's our pocket sewn on. Hopefully you'll agree that looks nice and neat and smooth. Let me just take out these tacking threads that will just draw your eye away from how nice and neat this looks. Oh, should have put glasses on, Claire. and then this one down here. Not going to pull out quite as neatly. You won't have those tacking threads in yours. I only put those in so that I could demonstrate to you exactly how close I was getting up to that corner. There's our pocket from the inside. So let's take off the slanted edge pin. And there we've got our lovely pocket all nice and neatly sewn on there with our lovely corners with no raw edges poking out there and a lovely smooth curve. And as I say, we've then not got this colour. Because if I could just lay that onto this part here, look, even if we'd stitched it down, you'd still see that edge on just there. Anyway, enough. So all I'm going to do now is poke the top layer of the threads through to the back. I'm going to give those a knot off, and then I'm going to then just snip those off because we don't need those. I'm also going to put on my glasses, and I'm just going to have a quick look along this edge here, and I can see where some of those size 4 stitches are. They're just along this edge just here. So any that I can see on the edge of my jacket, or edge of my pocket, I'm just going to undo and take out. Because as I say, and you might have done these in a different colour stitch, a different colour thread, which would have been fine as well, but they should just all just pull out for you quite nice and neatly. And leave that a really lovely, lovely jacket pocket edge for you. Okay, so I'm going to now go on and do the other one exactly the same. Once I've taken the stitches out of this one, and then I'll just give it a quick press, and then we'll meet back here in order to then talk about joining the jacket front to the back. Now, don't forget, you don't need to sew pockets onto your lining, so that's all fine. And everything else, I think, is in good order. So we should start to make some progress now. I know it's taken a long time with the pockets, but if you've wanted to, then you'll have fast forwarded out of that bit if you weren't interested. Okay, I'll come back to you when it's time to start construction.